Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and over the past week or so, we did get some information coming out of MagicCon Chicago about the commander set for the TARKIR DRAGONSTORM expansion, but it wasn't really enough information to bother making a separate video about, so I didn't go deep and I didn't cover all of that stuff, but just recently we got a few new leaked cards from that commander set, and I think we do have enough here to go over that I'm going to make a separate video. We're going to cover all of the new leaks and all of the default information that came out of MagicCon Chicago as well about these commander decks. It's looking like some pretty exciting stuff. There's even some hints at some of the mechanics coming in the set by the way that these commander decks are described. So we're going to jump in and we're going to cover it all. The new leaks in particular are very exciting. Before we do, please like the video. It helps it get it out to so many more people. It helps the channel to grow, and I would appreciate it so much. Just smash the like button. Let's do the thing. Also subscribe if you're new, because I have more content on the way, some crazy deck techs and some more spoiler content as well. And catch me live Monday through Friday over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/quarantinecapricorn, because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. Now let's talk about these cards. So first of all, we have the 5 different commander decks were spoiled. The only one that we haven't seen a card out of yet is the 𝑇𝑒𝑚𝑒 deck. Now, each of the 5 commander decks is themed around one of the 3 color combinations that sees itself as home within Tarkir, within the lore of Tarkir, with the clans of Tarkir. This one being 𝑇𝑒𝑚𝑒, and it specifically says here it ramps mana and summons dragons. So we can expect to see a lot of dragons in TARKIR DRAGONSTORM in general, but I think this commander set in particular, this commander deck in particular, is going to show a whole bunch of slew of dragons. It'll have probably more dragons than the rest of the decks, but it starts to get more interesting when we get to the rest of those. So next up we've got Sultai Arisen, which is a Sultai commander deck, obviously. It fills the graveyard and returns with zombie druids. So we're going to get a glimpse at this with the first officially spoiled card, and that is Teval the Balanced Scale, a 4/4 legendary spirit dragon with flying for 4 mana in the colors of Sultai. Whenever Teval attacks, you mill 3 cards, and then you may return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, and whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, you create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. Now this will trigger if you're exiling stuff from your graveyard and that sort of thing, or if you're returning things from your graveyard to your hand, it will also be triggered. Or if you just straight up return things from the graveyard to the battlefield. And with the way that the Sultai commander deck was described on the front of the box, it makes it seem like this deck's going to be more focused on actually reanimating creatures from the graveyard, putting them straight onto the battlefield, and then getting value off of Teval whenever you do that. That being said, I do want to point out that Teval makes a pretty sweet Insidious Roots style commander. You could build a deck around Teval that uses Insidious Roots in the 99 and do some pretty wild, crazy stuff. But we're going to move on to some of the newer stuff that's been spoiled. So next up we have the Jeskai Striker commander deck. And it's described here that you cast extra spells and flurry spell effects. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and make a guess at some of the new mechanics that are being included in TARKIR DRAGONSTORM, specifically because of how this is described. So, it says cast extra spells. We know Storm is sorta back, but it can't be back fully. It would be way too broken. So, casting extra spells, making sure to get, prowess triggers and that sort of thing seems to make sense, but it's really the next line, flurry spell effects, that catches my attention. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to guess that we're going to get a new version of Storm that's way more limited, and it's going to be called maybe Flurry. Maybe Flurry is the keyword, but I think what you're going to do is you're going to see sort of effects of a card that trigger almost like Storm, except not the full copy of the card. So it'll be like Storm, except instead of copying the spell, you'll have some minor little thing that triggers for each spell that you've cast in the turn. That's one way they might go with this. The other might just be just like Storm, where it copies the spell, except it doesn't continue to go down the rabbit hole and snowball into insane value. Maybe you can only max Storm off once with a flurry spell, not just however many times equal to the spells you cast. Maybe it's something like if this is your third spell cast in a turn, copy it, or something like that. So there's a few different directions they could go, but if I was to go out on a limb and guess, I do think that this flurry spell effects thing just sort of hints at maybe a keyword coming, but definitely a mechanic coming in the set, and I think that's really interesting. And we do have a leaked card to go with this commander deck, and that is Elsha Threefold Master. This is a 1/1 legendary Djinn monk with trample and prowess for just 3 mana in the colors of Jeskai. And whenever Elsha deals combat damage to a player, you create that many 1/1 white monk creature tokens with prowess. We're not sure if this is the actual commander or the backup commander for this deck, but it will definitely be included with this deck, and it's honestly looking kind of wild. A 3 mana legendary version almost of like a monastery mentor that can be your commander seems really interesting. It's pretty cheap. It's the cheapest it can be while allowing you access to 3 colors in your commander deck, which gives it a little bit of an edge over other Jeskai commanders. And the trample is really, really nice with the prowess, considering the deck is going to probably storm off with a bunch of spells and stuff like that. But what's really interesting is the fact that it makes 1/1s with prowess equal to damage dealt, so that makes it a little different than the Monastery Mentor. Even though you're not going to be making a token every single time you cast a spell, you do have the potential to make even more tokens, because every spell is giving you that prowess trigger anyway on Elsha, and increasing your damage output potential, and you're making 1/1s equal to the damage that you do. So if the spells that you're casting can buff up power as well, you actually have the potential to make even more tokens with Elsha than you could with Monastery Mentor, and I think that's pretty interesting. And the fact that it tramples means you have the absolute most potential to actually get through for damage in order to make those tokens, because you're doing all of your excess damage to the player. So I think this is a really cool card. It should be super fun to build around, and it'll be interesting to see what else is coming in that deck. But next up, we've got Abzan Armor. This is the Abzan commander deck, obviously, and it says play defenders and turn toughness into power. We actually have a bunch of toughness themed cards in standard right now, and even though these commander decks aren't going to be standard legal, it does seem like if they're going this direction for the commander deck, that maybe we will also get cards that play into that sort of play style, into that sort of archetype within the base set as well, adding to what we already have in standard, and maybe that deck will be a viable deck type in standard moving forward, which I think is kind of interesting. But let's check out the leaked commander for this deck. That's Betor, Ancestor's Voice. This is a 3/5 legendary spirit dragon with flying and lifelink for 5 mana in the colors of Abzan. At the beginning of your end step, you put a number of +1/+1 counters on up to 1 other target creature you control, equal to the amount of life you gained this turn, and also return up to 1 target creature card with mana value less than or equal to the amount of life you lost this turn from your graveyard to the battlefield. So super interesting. I like that it kind of does either or. If you're in a life gain or life loss deck, you could play this in like a Death Shadow weird deck where you're losing a bunch of life and take advantage of the second ability, or just play this in a life gain deck and constantly boost your team with +1/+1 counters. But it gets really interesting when you think about playing it in like a deck that uses both, which is sort of what the Bat Tribal does from Bloomburrow, right? They center on gaining life and losing life at the same time and give you value for both. So maybe we could use Betor as a commander for like a Bat Tribal deck or something, even though it's not a bat. But even if you're just using this for one or the other ability, it can still be really good. But interesting to think about the kind of decks you could build around trying to utilize both. So if you have ideas, let me know in the comments how you'd want to use Betor. I think there's a lot of potential for a card like this. But we're going to move on. The very last commander deck that was spoiled was Mardu Surge, the Mardu commander deck. And it says make attacker tokens and sacrifice them for value. So I do think it's really interesting that we're getting a Mardu deck that seems to be like a sacrifice or aristocrat style deck. That really speaks to me. I'm really excited about brewing around that in standard. But even outside of standard in commander, I think there's a lot of potential for a deck like that. Super interested in seeing what else ends up included in this deck and what else ends up being in the base set for Mardu. This seems to hint at some really interesting things to come. But we did get a spoiled commander for this deck, a leaked one. And this is Neriv Crackling Vanguard, a 4/4 legendary spirit dragon with flying and death touch for 5 mana in the colors of Mardu. Whenever he enters, you create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. So even that right there, for 5 mana, you're getting a 4/4 flying death toucher and 2 1/1 goblin tokens. And because it could be your commander, right? Every time you replay it, granted it's going to be a bit expensive because its base cost is already 5 to begin with, but every single time you replay it, you're going to get those 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, which seems perfect for like a sacrifice or aristocrat style deck. Just keep generating tokens. If they kill your commander, you just keep doing it, which is pretty cool. But the second ability is where it gets pretty wild. Whenever Neriv attacks, you exile a number of cards from the top of your library equal to the number of differently named tokens you control, and during any turn you attacked with a commander, you may play those cards. This actually seems kind of nuts, and what's cool too is you can play those cards without necessarily having to attack with Neriv. If you decide to use a different Mardu commander for your commander deck, and Neriv's just a part of the 99, and you have Neriv out, you can still trigger being able to play those cards you get off Neriv if you're attacking with your actual commander, which is really, really cool. But I just love that it triggers off of differently named tokens in particular. This requires you to get really inventive with how you put your deck together. You don't want to focus on a whole bunch of cards that give you the exact same token type. In fact, it makes me think of Bloomburrow. A lot of these cards that we're seeing today kind of are callbacks to Bloomburrow in a way. We already saw sort of the bat tribal commander in a way, even though it's not a bat. This makes me think of the offspring mechanic from Bloomburrow, because if you offspring a card and make a token copy of it, obviously that token is going to be the only named token of that type, unless you play another offspring card that's the exact same card. So it kind of plays into that a little bit, and this might be a really good deck to include that kind of mechanic. But just in general, trying to create as many different named tokens as possible, maybe using cards that turn your actual cards into tokens or make token copies of an actual card that's in play or something like that, can really help you take full advantage of something like Neriv. But the potential for this is absolutely insane. There's so many different ways I think you could brew with it, and if you have ideas about how you'd want to brew with it, definitely let me know in the comments, because the potential is just wild for a card like this. I just think there's so much craziness you could do and that you could build around a card like this, and I can't wait to see what everybody in the community comes up with. I think this card is just nuts. But that's going to do it for today's video. So we do have an idea of the 5 different commander decks coming. We know that there are 5, and that they're centered around those color wedges, you know, to those 3 color combinations that are native to the plane of Tarkir, which is super cool. And dragons are going to be a huge push, which just makes sense. But when there is more spoiler content to cover, I will make sure to make a video, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Please like the video. It helps me get it out to more people. I would appreciate it so much. Just hit it. It takes a second. Just do the thing. I appreciate you. Catch me live Monday through Friday over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/QuarantineCapricorn. Because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. In fact, as soon as I finish making this video, I'm going to be starting a stream. So maybe I'll see you there. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.